Americans actually made a movie about Unit 731, a particle collider connects time and space. It takes you through different timelines, catching a glimpse of the inhumane live experiments in that dark era, human anatomy, live burning, plague experiments, human-animal blood exchange. Each and every incident is too numerous to record. In 1931, the Japanese Guangdong Army invaded Manchuria, China, under the pretext of Chinese aggression, and soon extended their sphere of influence to the distant Russian border. The peaceful life of John's family of 3 was also shattered by the ruthless war. Fighter jets blotted out the sky, buzzing overhead. On this day, John hurried home to tell his wife Mary, "I heard those Japanese officers are looking for construction workers everywhere." John happened to be in this line of work. Sure enough, a few Japanese came over after a while. They found out that John was a construction worker, and ordered him to pack his luggage and follow the army. A bearded doctor traveled through time and space, and saw the scene just now. This means that the particle collider of the research institute was successfully designed. To verify this, the bearded doctor couldn't wait to increase the arc intensity, but it caused a big explosion. Many years later, a man named Neil went back home. Like John, he was also a construction worker. He was currently separated from his ex-wife Elena, but they still co-parented their son Willie. Neil's company recently received a project. 2 clients, Carl and Byron, auctioned a piece of land from a foreclosed owner. This piece of land had been transferred 3 times since 1968. Neil's boss Garrison accepted the commission, and planned to rebuild this place into a school. But as soon as he arrived at the scene, Neil saw an abandoned factory. The two got into the building, and looking at the surrounding furnishings, this should be the laboratory where the explosion happened. The particle collider was also buried in this pile of junk. Neil found that there was still uneaten food on a certain desk. He couldn't help but guess that the employees here seemed to have left suddenly. Maybe something bad happened at that time. Garrison told Neil to mind his own business. "We just need to figure out how to renovate and decorate." The two went down the stairs to the lower floor. They passed through the messy equipment, got into an innermost space, and saw the particle collider. There was a very strong magnetic field around this thing. Neil's flashlight and mobile phone were all affected. He plucked up the courage to approach the machine, and seemed to see the bearded doctor in John's family from 1931, through that layer of blue light waves. The next second, Neil felt someone grab him by the neck, and he fell to the ground, regaining consciousness. Garrison looked at him like this and quickly said that they would do a mold test and then leave. Neil had to suppress the strangeness in his heart, and conduct the test honestly. But as soon as he went out, Garrison started complaining. "I've been waiting for you outside for 45 minutes. What kind of mold test takes so long?" Neil was very confused when he heard this. He clearly only stayed inside for about 10 minutes, but the watch on his wrist proved that Garrison wasn't wrong. This place was really strange. As soon as he finished speaking, Neil caught a glimpse of a strange person, standing under a nearby electricity pylon. It was just that it was too far away to see clearly. Neil didn't think much and left with Garrison. The next day, he finally got the chance to spend the weekend with his son Willie. Neil planned to take his son for a ride on his motorcycle, because his ex-wife hated him riding motorcycles, so Neil was going to get rid of the bike soon. Before selling it, he must take Willie for a ride. Neil let him sit at the front, taught him how to control the motorcycle, and kept urging Willie to speed up. At this point, that strange feeling came again. The sound of the laboratory rang around Neil. Willie sitting in front also became John's son Jack. Neil was distracted, forgetting where he was for a moment, causing Willie in front to hit a tree trunk and the bike to tip over. Neil quickly got up to check on him, only to see his son's face covered in blood. Neil anxiously waited for the surgery to end, and Elena came as soon as she heard the news. She was thoroughly disappointed with Neil. "It's fine if you like playing with those dangerous things, but why did you take Willie with you?" The doctor came over to interrupt their quarrel. She pointed out that Willie's retina was severely damaged, and needed a corneal transplant to restore healthy vision, but it would take time to find a matching donor. During this time, the macula of the retina would further degenerate. "Does Willie have insurance?" "I'm afraid it will cost a lot of money." Elena couldn't afford the high medical expenses. She warned Neil to raise enough money for the surgery. "No matter what, you caused this trouble, so you take responsibility for it." Neil called Garrison but couldn't get through, so he had to go to the office to see him. But before he could speak, he was interrupted by Garrison.
"You get those mold test results yet?" Oh, shit. My bad, man. Look, I'll head back and go grab them, okay?
Luckily, Garrison wasn't very angry. Whatever the test results were, anyway, the contract must be finalized. he asked Neil to have lunch with him. It wasn't too late to get the test results after eating. Neil took the opportunity of lunch to talk about his son's injury. He begged Garrison to contact him first, if there were any extra shifts. After finishing his work for the day, Neil returned to Elena's house. Now that his son was injured, he needed someone to take care of him. Elena had no choice but to let him move back temporarily. But the moment Neil touched Willie, strange illusions came again. Neil saw Jack's face through his son again. He forcibly suppressed the doubts in his heart, and prepared to talk to Elena, but he noticed that she was crying secretly in the room. It turned out that during the re-examination, the doctor predicted that Willie's cornea could last for another 3 weeks. If the transplant wasn't done soon, he would go completely blind. Neil didn't expect the situation to be so serious.
What, you think we're high on the list with our insurance and our finances? After all the money you blew, when you blew your DUI?
Elena had long lost trust in Neil. The latter still wanted to argue a little, but as soon as he touched Elena's body, Neil's brain started to go haywire again. He now firmly believed that his experience at the abandoned factory had affected his physical health. Maybe he could get some work-related injury compensation because of this. Elena just thought he was daydreaming when she heard this. Neil took out the business card he picked up at the factory and searched according to the remaining information. Judging from the business card, the bearded doctor's name was Maris. Before he could find more information, his good friend Andrew called. The reason was that Neil had contacted Andrew once before to sell a boat. Because the boat was co-owned by the two of them, he must ask Andrew first before selling it. Andrew said that he was just going out of town with his wife Naomi this weekend, so why not meet up then to talk in detail? The annoying hallucinations still appeared from time to time. Neil knew that Elena wouldn't believe what he had seen, so he kept his mouth shut. That day, he had just watched Elena and his son leave. Then he saw the strange person, who was under the electricity pylon before, in a car across the road. The other person was wearing a mask, so his face couldn't be seen. When Neil spotted him, he immediately drove away. Not long after, Andrew and his wife Naomi arrived, and the three of them sat in the backyard drinking and chatting. Naomi had recently encountered racial bullying by white people in the workplace. She was indignantly speaking what had happened. It's a pity that Neil was distracted and couldn't listen at all. Accidentally, he pressed his bare hand on the grill. The severe pain brought him back to his senses. At this point, Garrison came over to say hello, and the group immediately went to the bar. But Garrison was very indiscreet. He knew full well that Naomi was a married woman, but he kept paying her attentions. Neil couldn't stand it and had to remind him to be careful. Garrison argued that he was just chatting, then he changed the subject and dragged Neil onto the stage to sing. But that annoying hallucination lingered. In a trance, Neil saw someone performing a live anatomy. Affected by the hallucination, he unconsciously attacked Garrison. The latter pushed Neil away and left in a huff. After regaining consciousness, Neil thought to himself that something was wrong. He can't afford to offend Garrison and lose his job now. On the way back, Neil told his two close friends about the hallucinations, and he planned to go to the abandoned factory again. First, to get the mold test results back. Second, to see what exactly was mysterious about that place. Of course, if Andrew and his wife didn't want to go in, they could wait outside. Andrew said that he wouldn't go in anyway, so the two of them could do as they pleased. The car soon arrived at the destination. Andrew stayed in the car as expected. Only Naomi accompanied Neil into the building. Because she worked in the news industry, she was full of adventurous spirit towards all unknown things. Neil and Naomi approached the particle collider. The flashlight flickered a few times and then died, and the mobile phone also lost signal. Like Neil before, Naomi saw the Mary from that year through this machine. She saw their family suffering inhumane torture. Naomi had an epileptic seizure due to the influence, and fell to the ground. Luckily, she recovered after a few minutes and quickly left with Neil, and Andrew, like Garrison before, complained that the two had been inside for almost an hour. This was probably the time distortion, caused by the operation of the particle collider. Whenever Naomi had an epileptic seizure, it was hard for her to remember what happened before she fell. She had a splitting headache now, and wanted to go back to rest early. Andrew dropped Neil off at his door and left quickly. Unexpectedly, the masked man's car was still parked on a nearby street. Neil took a photo of the license plate and went back home, only to find that the back door had been left unlocked. There was a rustling sound in the kitchen. Neil, worried that there might be a mouse, hurried over to check. At this point, a dark figure was quietly approaching.
I know who you are. That you've been inside. That you've seen through the guard's eye.
Neil grabbed a kitchen knife nearby and threatened the masked man to get out. It's really scary to have a stranger break into the house in the middle of the night. Unluckily, Neil didn't have much energy to deal with this matter. As soon as dawn broke, He went to the company to apologize to Garrison. He explained that he didn't mean to hit him last night, and handed him the mold test report. The results showed that the whole building was contaminated with stachybotrys and black mold. Excessive inhalation could lead to brain damage, so it's definitely not possible to rashly rebuild it into a school. But Garrison had invested most of his fortune to sign this big deal. He wouldn't stop the project because of these molds. But the more Neil thought about it, the more dangerous he felt it was. He had just checked on the computer that the factory used high-voltage direct current. Only special laboratories would use this kind of electricity. There might be harmful substances left in it. The two disagreed and soon had an argument. Garrison blew e-cigarette smoke in Neil's face, and along with it, those hallucinations struck again. In the scene, John was carving toys in a Japanese factory. He hoped Jack could be happy here, but the little action was caught by an officer. The latter reminded him that those who didn't work honestly would be punished. Neil keenly noticed that the Japanese officer's shoulder badge was marked with 731. At this point, the stretcher carried by several soldiers overturned, revealing some bloody stumps. John was startled and tried to run away, but was knocked unconscious by the chasing soldiers. This scene ended here. An excited Neil asked Garrison if he had seen the scene just now. The latter warned him that if he didn't pull himself together, he could leave the company. But those hallucinations just wouldn't let Neil go. When he got home and touched his son, he would see those Japanese officers conducting live experiments on the young Jack.
Wiley, why would you say that? Huh? Shoo Yi, why would you say that?
Willie looked confused. He hadn't said anything just now. Elena led her son to rest speechlessly. Garrison lied that the test results were clean, and was about to discuss further with the client. Unexpectedly, Naomi came over with a serious face, and asked if Neil was at work. I called, but couldn't get through. Garrison had some thoughts about Naomi, so he stepped forward to greet her politely, but when the two shook hands, he also saw those hallucinations. The Japanese officer dragged Mary away in front of John, and tied her to a chair for frostbite experiments. Naomi seemed to feel the same pain, and her epilepsy flared up again. Luckily, this time it only lasted a few seconds, but Garrison thus realized that Naomi had probably been to that strange factory. On the other side, Neil still remembered the pronunciation of pestis. He immediately turned on the computer to search, and the translator gave the answer as epidemic, plague. At this point, the outside was suddenly illuminated by light, and Neil picked up a fire poker and went out. He confronted the Mary in front of him, asking who she really was. It wasn't until Naomi's voice sounded that it helped him dispel the hallucination. Naomi explained that since she had been to that factory, she had also started to experience auditory and visual hallucinations. Neil was about to explain what he had found, when he noticed another car parked outside the door. It turned out that Andrew had chased over. Worried about his wife, he had always thought that Neil and Naomi had an unusual relationship. This time, finding the two meeting alone, he got angry instantly. He bluntly said that he had sold the outboard motor of the boat. This would cause the value of the boat itself to drop significantly, and Neil was in urgent need of selling the boat for cash. In a fit of anger, he wanted to hit Andrew, but was pushed to the ground by Andrew. Naomi hurried forward to help Neil up. Unexpectedly, as soon as they made contact, hallucinations came one after another. Neil wanted to find out where these images came from, so he searched for what 731 was. Together with Naomi, a history too heinous to be fully recorded gradually unfolded. During World War II, the Japanese Guangdong Army's Unit 731 Epidemic Prevention and Water Purification Force in Manchuria, under the pretext of disease prevention and water purification, secretly conducted live experiments and developed bacterial weapons. They established the world's largest bacterial warfare base in northeast China. The person in charge there, Ichiro Kaga, was the Japanese general Neil had seen in his hallucinations. They conducted live experiments on Chinese, Koreans, and Soviets. The experiments included live anatomy, live burning, frostbite tests, plague experiments, etc. Both of them gasped when they saw this. Naomi didn't want to continue the investigation, and was ready to go home, but Neil wanted to know the reason for his hallucinations. Moreover, Naomi had more channels in the news industry to help her complete the investigation.
I keep seeing the same woman in you.
So what? Just because I have Japanese ancestry, that tunnel somehow karmically connected me to her?
Neil didn't say much, but took out the license plate number he had photographed. He hoped Naomi could help check the registration information. The next day, Elena invited Garrison to her mother's house. She hoped he wouldn't fire Neil because of recent events, as their family was in urgent need of money. If Neil lost his job, there would be no hope for Willie. As soon as she finished speaking, the little boy walked into the living room. Garrison stood up to greet him. but unexpectedly triggered a visual hallucination. In the image, Jack was crying and telling his father that those people were hurting his mother. John didn't know how to comfort his son, so he just told him to close his eyes and not look, to treat it as a nightmare. Not long after, Mary was thrown back by those Japanese, her hands were mutilated and covered in blood, then Garrison recovered from the hallucination. But Elena found that his behavior just now was exactly the same as Neil's before. Could it be that the factory really had hallucinogenic effects? On the other side, Naomi couldn't find any registration information and planned to ask her father, Mr. Tanaka, for help. The other person was a prestigious policeman with more authority. Neil first took out the business card and asked Tanaka to investigate. The results showed that Dr. Maris had presided over the Indra project in 1978, but Tanaka didn't have the authority to view the project files. Neil had to ask him to check the license plate number again. The information showed that the owner's name was Raneth Nanda. He was also a member of the Indra project, but was dishonorably dismissed in 1978. The government didn't record anything about him after that. There was a photo in the information of a group of experimenters standing in front of the Enrico Fermi Nuclear Research Institute. Nanda was standing next to Dr. Maris. Tanaka found his current address. Neil and the other person immediately went to see Nanda. On the way, Naomi checked what Indra meant. The net of Indra is a net of precious beads, hung in front of the palace of Lord Indra in Indian mythology. Later, it was quoted and developed by the Huayan school of Buddhism, symbolizing that all things in the universe are interdependent and harmoniously integrated without obstacles. Neil soon arrived at Nanda's residence. He asked Naomi to wait in the car while he climbed into Nanda's house through the back window. The walls were covered with dense information. At this point, Nanda, who had been out, came back. Luckily, Naomi came in time with pepper spray. The two controlled Nanda and asked him what the Indra project really was. Nanda explained that it was a cross-dimensional reconnaissance application. The collider in the factory was called the Eye of Indra. It detected entangled particles across time and space. It also found that these particles reflect each other's behaviors. Moreover, the souls of those affected by the Eye of Indra were entangled with each other. That is to say, Dr. Maris in 1987, John from Unit 731, and Neil now are the legendary past and present lives. Reincarnation can actually turn a yellow person into a white person. In short, the three lines were entangled because of the collider. Neil couldn't figure out why they were involved.
Are we gonna change World War II?
Maybe the visions are to change us.
As soon as the words fell, a speeding car hit Neil. This collision made him see the timeline of Unit 731 again. A family of three was escorted by soldiers towards the incinerator. John rushed towards the protective net to buy time, but was shot dead by several soldiers. The next second, Neil and Naomi woke up with a sharp headache. What they had just seen left them stunned for a long time. Naomi told Neil that if this kind of entanglement is real, then what you are reacting to is incurable family trauma. For example, John in 1931 couldn't save his wife and children. In 1987, Dr. Maris, despite his wife's opposition, increased the power of the collider, which led to a laboratory explosion, and his wife and unborn child died tragically. Now your family is also on the verge of collapse. Luckily, Neil still had a chance to make amends. We can't change World War II. We can't change that explosion. We can only change ourselves now. Neil thought Naomi was right, but as soon as he got home, he saw Garrison's car parked outside the door. Elena had already packed her things and was going to take Willie away. Neil guessed immediately that Garrison had spoken ill of him behind his back, causing Elena to misunderstand. He pounced on Garrison and scuffled with him. This scene overlapped with the scene in another timeline where John assassinates Ichiro Kaga. It seemed that Garrison corresponded to Ichiro Kaga. While the two were fighting, Naomi took Elena and Willie away. On the way, she told the mother and son that the hallucinations Neil saw weren't lies. We are closely related to another timeline. Naomi took the two to see Nanda to ask him for a way to save them. On the other side, Neil got rid of Garrison and went to the company. He took out the mold test result and handed it to the people from the real estate company. When Garrison went back to the company and found the document missing, he immediately called Neil. The two made an appointment to meet at that abandoned factory. Nanda just happened to tell Elena that there was a way to save Willie's eyes. We can use the collider to change the node where the motorcycle accident occurred. As a result, several important figures all came near the abandoned factory. At this point, Neil, who was furious, rode a motorcycle and crashed into Garrison. When Elena and others walked in, they saw the two lying on the ground. Nanda was too lazy to pay attention to them and quickly started the collider, asking Elena to assist beside him. As soon as the machine was turned on, the three timelines overlapped and changed. The story goes back to the day when John's family was escorted to the incinerator, but this time, with the help of his family, he sneaked up on Ichiro Kaga and put on the other's military uniform and gas mask. As for Ichiro Kaga in a long gown, he replaced John, who should have died a tragic death. He subconsciously fled to the iron net and was shot dead by his unaware lackeys. John took the opportunity to pretend to be an officer and led his family to escape from the base, becoming one of the only 3 survivors of the Unit 731 incident. Dr. Maris in the second timeline was about to increase the power of the collider regardless of the consequences, but was stopped by Nanda beside him. Now, the 2 timelines had undergone a qualitative change. Willie naturally avoided the motorcycle accident. At the end of the story, Naomi took her daughter to Harbin, China, to meet the only survivor of the Unit 731 incident. But John and Mary had long since passed away, leaving only the elderly Jack. He agreed to have his story written into a report to tell the world, so that everyone would remember what exactly happened back then. The story ends here. The director has used such a serious topic as Unit 731, yet the core of this film's discussion is still family. From this perspective, it's actually an overreaction to a minor issue, but it's still meaningful that this period of history can be brought to the big screen. There must always be someone to remind everyone to remember this history. It's a pity that such a good setting of Unit 731 plus time travel tells such an ordinary story.